Hi, hi everyone. Welcome back. So today I have our friend Mclntyre-Lahner with us, and we're going to be presenting some information that we presented at what conference was that, Ann?
The National Public Performance Conference.
That's right, the National Public Performance Conference. And this is on creating and sustaining a data-informed culture. And we use the term throwing out the baby with the bathwater because, loosely defined, it's to lose something valuable when you're trying to get rid of something unwanted. And this is in the context of perhaps having done some performance work in an organization and sort of gotten the ball rolling, and then an administration changes or new program requirements come in or something happens that threatens to derail the work that you've already done. And part of the dynamic is that a lot of times when a new administration comes in or a new strategic initiative occurs, that sometimes goes along with changing what's being measured, changing the measurement framework you're using. And we thought that it was important to emphasize that you don't need to throw everything out and start from scratch when that happens. But it's okay to be adaptive, but it's also okay to retain good work that you've been doing. So that's where the throwing out the baby with the bathwater comes in. So Ann, why don't you talk about what we're going to be talking about here?
Sure, I'll talk about what we're going to be talking about. What we're going to be talking about is like Ron just suggested, the importance of creating a sustainable data-informed culture. And we'll go over the 5 building blocks that we've identified as part of that process. And then we'll talk about some really practical steps to creating, maintaining, and sustaining a healthy data culture and how you can sustain it, like Ron said, when you've got organizational or policy or programmatic changes. And then maybe the most important bullet that's on this slide is the importance of including and getting buy-in from your staff and your external stakeholders.
Yeah, so the 5 key building blocks that we identified include demonstrated value, permeating and saturating, stealth, flexible and adaptive, and integration of new approaches. And we'll talk about each one of these in turn. But the thinking, though, is that these apply both in creating a data culture or a data-informed culture, and also they're particularly applicable to sustaining one in the face of the kinds of changes we mentioned. So the first one is demonstrated value. The best way to protect one's efforts, performance efforts in particular, from being discarded or marginalized is to make sure they're valuable. And when you do that, it starts with the work you do within the organization with people who will be receiving your performance reports, people who will be working with the performance data that are generated. You have to allow them to say, what's in it for me? Why would this help? Why should I be going to this great length to collect these data and to actually try to work with them to improve? So you have to allow that dialogue to take place, but then, as time goes on and people do work with it and do find value in it, you want to create kind of a little treasure chest or archive of evidence that show positive results of the application of the measurement efforts. And the more you have concrete examples that these things work, that this information is helpful and result in real changes, positive changes, the more bulletproof you're going to be when people come in and try to change things up. Off to you, Anne.
I love talking about this one. So permeating and saturating. So when you think about saturation, it's filling something up to the brim till it can't take anything more. And permeating is actually how deep you get. It's the trickling down through the soil, usually, of water or another material. So we're talking about really filling something up and making sure that the effort doesn't just sit on the surface and flood or run off, but that it actually permeates through all the layers. And in this instance, we're talking about permeating through the layers of an organization. So when you're thinking about a garden, for that garden to grow, for the plants to flourish in it, you need to saturate it, right? You can't just like give it a little bit here,
It's 4 o'clock.
a little bit there, you know, run by with the watering can. You really need to make sure that you're saturating it with enough water. In the same way that we want to saturate our effort with enough information and reason and buy-in, and really make sure that people understand it and get a full dose, a full flavor of the importance of what we're doing. Why are we creating a data-informed culture? And similarly, permeation is, you don't just sell it to the executive suite. You don't just sell it to the commissioner's team or the executives in the agency. You need to sell it to the people who are doing the work, because those are the people who inadvertently or on purpose can make your garden grow or can make it shrivel up and die. You want to make sure that the people who are responsible for collecting the data and using the data right on the street level or the ground level get it and understand. So you need to make sure that they're included when you share the information, when you talk about the process, and when you create all the steps to introduce a process like this in your agency. So again, staff at all levels, your external stakeholders, you know, should be included as well. And in the same way that if we go back to talking about watering a garden and saturating and permeating, if the water gushes out, you know, if you feed people through using a fire hose, if you use a fire hose on your garden, you're going to flush all the dirt away, never mind the seeds and the seedlings. In the same way, if you overwhelm people with data and the initiative and brand new world kind of talking, you're going to send them scurrying away as well. So you want to introduce it in a helpful and non-threatening way. You want to let them see how this truly empowers them as members of the agency or members of an initiative, and that you keep both the information, the data, and your requests of them and your willingness to answer their requests should stay consistent on an ongoing basis.
And okay, so yeah.
As part of that,
yeah.
Keep on. You want me to keep on going?
Keep on going.
So as part of that, especially that offer of help and requests for people to keep on sharing information with you, you need to understand that some people in your organization are not going to embrace data. They're not going to be happy about collecting and reporting more data, or even using more data. So be prepared for some anxiety around data and actually some fear about using data. If you can't get past that, it'll be like trying to water a little clump of dirt that's become so hard it's like concrete. You're not going to be able to permeate. So you want to, in the same way that you want to gently break through a clod of hard dirt, you want to gently understand people's concerns. You want to support them in overcoming their fears about using data and the time that it might take, which is really all about them being afraid that they can't do the job. So you want to support them and be gentle, be consistent, and make sure, we say in the slide that it's therapeutic. And what we mean by that is you want to make sure that people see that this is something that's positive for them. They're learning something new, perhaps. They're absolutely probably taking on new tasks, and that can be a good thing. And you want to get them past the fear, past the anxiety, and get them to the point where they can embrace it enough that they can do the work and be part and feel part of your initiative.
So sometimes, as Ann said, if you feed people with a fire hose, they're going to react negatively to that. If you try to overwhelm them, saturation, as Ann implied, saturation is not the same as overwhelming people with information or with data, or putting so many data projects on their plate that they're just going to collapse from the weight of it. Saturation has to be done over time and from multiple angles. But sometimes you need to start small, and sometimes you need to almost do your initial projects under the radar. Build a constituency within and outside the organization, one project at a time, one successful report done, one successful continuous improvement project done. Over time, that starts as permeation, but it also will ultimately result in saturation. One of the things we've seen is that you want to avoid too much fanfare. You want to avoid a situation where you're announcing a big performance initiative and there's a big kickoff party and lots of initial effort and work that just kind of dies out over time, and there's little follow-up conducted over time. It's not the big kickoff party that matters. It's the consistent everyday application of these principles, data-informed performance approaches and methods that matter. So when we say stealth, we're not saying being tricky or misrepresenting anything, but we are saying that sometimes, because everybody's busy, because people in some ways are trained to resist things that sound like major changes, you use this kind of under the radar, one project at a time approach, but that can still over time result in appropriate levels of saturation and permeation. Back to you for flexibility, Ann.
So after using a bit of stealth to bring your project in if you need to, what you want to do is you're slowly building capacity, you're slowly creating that change as the way we do business as usual. So that while you want to be consistent, you also need to be flexible and be willing to adapt what you're doing to meet the needs of the organization and to get buy-in from the people in the organization. So it's really important to understand that after administrative change happens, a new governor is elected, a new commissioner is appointed, a new agency head comes in. You want to make sure that you have not set yourself up and your data initiative up that it can be tossed out, like tossing out the baby with the bathwater. What you want to do is find the things that you have in common with the way of business you've been building, which of course is good and useful and data informed, and make sure that wherever possible, you can create a meld or a match or adapt it so that it fits in with the new vision or the impact that a new administration wants to make. Everybody wants to come in and look what I'm going to do. And if you've given them a solid base upon which to build, yes, you may need to adapt your approach a bit. You might need to call your work something else instead of Ron and Ann's fabulous data system. You might take the work that's been done under Ron and Ann's fabulous data system and call it the new commissioner's super duper data system. But you've got the same work, you're doing the same important efforts, and you're creating that consistency from one administration to the next. Now, to do that, you're going to need to leverage internal and external partners and resources in helping to create this new hybrid approach. When you write something, when you create a document, you don't need it to be signed, sealed, delivered, and bound. A living document that can change as it's needed, that documents the work that you do, that describes your initiative, can be really helpful. Be flexible enough that other people can get their fingerprints on your work. And then be willing to utilize multiple different formats on the way that you report something, on the way you describe something, on the way you show data, and make sure that you're always celebrating the use of moving forward in a data-informed way.
Part of that flexibility and adaptability is being able to incorporate new approaches, particularly if a new governor comes in or a new commissioner or agency head comes in. They might want to put their own stamp on things by saying, you know what, we're definitely going to be doing lean government stuff. I like that. I like lean, and we're going to be doing that. Or somebody might come in and say, I've seen a lot of people do program logic models. I really want us to create program logic models for all our programs, right? Now, you may have been using another framework like RBA or some other general measurement approach that didn't include performance, that didn't include program logic models or lean, right? The key thing to remember is just because you're adapting a new approach doesn't mean you need to throw out prior good work. You can create a hybrid approach, borrowing from other approaches that are being introduced, using what's good about what you've already done. Most of the measurement work that is done can be useful in almost any framework.
Yeah.
So you don't need to throw it out. You can just, it might be as simple as just moving stuff around into the new model. It might take some additional work to make the new model work, but try not to get so stuck in your framework that you lose the potential value of new approaches or seem like you're resisting something new that's being brought to the table by the new commissioner or someone new in your organization, right? It's not, there's no need for any of this to be all or nothing, right? Either we're going with the approach we're already doing, or we're not going to use any of what we did before and we're going to start from scratch. There's no need to do that. And I've seen that happen in organizations, and it's not necessary. So, you know, as part of that being flexible and adaptive, realizing that, you know, part of the living nature of this work is that sometimes a different perspective or a different approach might be required, and that's okay. You don't need to just drop everything you've ever developed in the past and start doing the new thing. So, for example, you can often integrate frameworks. You know, there are some overall frameworks like RBA and collective impact, right, that you could use as sort of an umbrella framework. Sometimes things like balanced scorecard and project logic models emphasize the logic and relationship between or among measures. That can fit right in, either of those can fit right in under RBA or collective impact if you're thoughtful about it. And then there are things that focus on the continuous improvement aspect of things like Lean or Six Sigma or continuous quality improvement or the Plan, Do, Check, Act, Plan, Do, Study, Act framework or cycle, right? All of this stuff can be used together if necessary. I wouldn't say I would advocate using all of it together if it wasn't necessary, but you could take any of these pieces and relate them if it meant that you could have a more sustainable overall approach in your organization. Back to you, Anne.
Every once in a while, though, no matter how good you are, you're going to get pushback. And there are times when you need to go to your external resources and leverage the help that they can give you. Now, of course, this works much better if you've been a good partner all along to them and you've provided support when they need support, and you've been a good, honest partner to work with. But assuming that that's the case, and assuming that there are changes being made specifically within the state of Connecticut, which is where we've done a lot of our work, some resources that can really be helpful and that we have found helpful in the past to be able to leverage include the Open Data Portal, which is an existing portal and really repository for public data at all different levels of state government in Connecticut. It is most especially utilized in the executive branch, but there are data in there from other branches of government as well. The Results-Based Accountability, or RBA Practitioner Network, is a great resource group that's been around for quite a few years, and it's got members in the public sector, the private sector, who work together to understand how to better utilize the RBA or outcome-focused approach to improve programs and improve the efforts that they're involved in. You can also call on colleagues in other state agencies if you work for the state, and other nonprofit agencies, whether you work for the state or the nonprofits, to really to assist you in your efforts to sustain the good data work you've been doing. Finally, you can also use the Connecticut Data Collaborative, which are a great supporter in many ways of using data and using data well in the state of Connecticut. Now, the reason that I mention these groups is because they exist. They provide a lot of support and resources to each other and to data people now. And the kinds of things that you can utilize them for would be, where possible, for them to message the importance of the work that's been done in your organization when change comes through, to actually get out there and advocate with new leadership about, yes, the importance of their new efforts and the importance of also including the existing efforts that have been created and that have been so successful and so important in the very recent past. And maybe most importantly, but equally important, you can use them as a sounding board for coming up with ideas that you can utilize to continue to make the data that you've already invested in, that your organization has invested in, to continue to advocate and utilize those important data. You know, one thing I learned from a boss of mine in a state organization was, if you want to be able to sustain a new initiative, don't make it yours. Don't let anyone make it yours. It needs to have shared ownership. So now you may have done a lot of the work and it may have been your brilliant brainchild, but if you want that initiative to exist, other people need to feel like they're stakeholders in it as well. They need to feel that a part of them is in that initiative. And that goes for your external stakeholders as well. It goes for people who are submitting data to the open data portal. It goes to those RBA practitioners, to your colleagues in other state agencies who may have contributed ideas, who may have sat on work groups, and who may have supported your efforts as you go along. And it also counts for the Connecticut Data Collaborative as well. But many people need to own your initiative. You need to sow the seeds of your garden. You need to water them well, but you need to sow them wide so that many people are invested in keeping the initiative going.
Right. It's both leveraging these external resources and also building constituencies through these kind of networks you create. A network of open data portal users, the RBA Practitioners Network, a network of colleagues in state and nonprofit agencies. And the Data Collaborative is constantly building their network of people who utilize their data and their services. So this notion of a constituency for your data products that are generated, you know, both in internal constituencies within the organization and external ones, is really important, because if people find the stuff that you create to be of value, they're more likely to say, hey, wait, you know, we use that report regularly. We work with those data a lot. We don't want you to stop doing that just because a new framework is being applied, or just because the commissioner and of the organization has changed, right? We want you to continue to produce these data because they are valuable to us. So that can help. This building of constituencies and leveraging external resources can help solidify that, you know, kind of expression of value back to the people who are in charge of whatever changes are occurring. I also think that this stuff, these external resources can help even as you are trying to do your initial permeation and saturation. There are ways in which you connect people within your organization to resources that can provide ongoing technical assistance and support that doesn't emanate from a performance unit or any one unit within the organization. It's an array of external supports that makes the exchange of information and data more vibrant and more, it supports that permeation and saturation that's going on. And that can start from day one with a new performance initiative. So this is just reminding people that we also write books and, and we like people to use them when possible, but you're always welcome if you have questions to shoot us an email and we can talk about this stuff more. And do you have any parting thoughts on any of this, especially, you know, how you move from a nascent fledgling effort in an organization to an organization that you would say fully embraces data-driven, data-driven or data-informed culture?
Well, I think the word culture is really important, and culture means that that's the way we do things. That's what we embrace. That's part of how we do business, especially in a large organization, small ones as well. So in an organization, and I think that concept of other people owning it, everyone feeling invested in it. I think that goes along with permeation. It certainly goes along with needing to be flexible and adaptable, because if you're super rigid about what something's got to be, what it's got to look like, what it's got to be called, how it's got to be used, then yep, people are going to be like, oh, that's just Ann again. That's the way she wants to do it. That's her project. And then that will be really easy for people to get on board to get rid of Ann's project. But it's when it's our project, it's our work. This is the way we do things. This is how using data has helped us do a better job on behalf of our clients. And that means that sometimes you're going to have to change your vision a little bit. You know, you wanted the program to work just this particular way, and it's going to work a little bit differently because a lot of people's fingerprints got on there and it changed a little bit. And you need to see that as a good thing, because when their fingerprints are on it, it means they own it as well as you do, and they're invested in it as well as you are. And that is how you sustain that hard-won culture that you've helped to create.
I think that permeation factor down to the people who actually serve customers or clients is crucial, right? Because if they don't see the value in the data collection that they're doing and the how the measures that are being generated relate to the work they do every day, they're not going to care, and they're going to become very dismissive of all this stuff. So that making sure, and this is making sure that the line staff, the people who are actually doing the work, are part of the effort to build this culture and to build this reporting framework that is used in an organization is really, really important.
You know, that truer words were never said than what you just said. I have had the opportunity a number of times to go and, you know, chat with data entry people about the stuff that they're entering, and like, you know, you can't say it this way, but why the data are so bad? Why are things so inaccurate? Why do they seem like impossible? And you find out that if no one explains to somebody why you need to enter data a certain way or what's supposed to be entered, then they're going to, you know, nature abhors a vacuum. So do data entry people. They know they have to put something there, so they're going to come up with some rule of thumb that works for them. And it may be totally wrong. So if you haven't taken the time to educate people and to include them, to get their ideas on what might work better, they're going to do what makes sense to them. And sometimes that's going to get you really inaccurate data or no data at all. So for so many reasons, it's so important to include everyone at every single level of the organization.
So just to remind people, the 5 building blocks: demonstrate value, make sure people think of the products that are being generated as valuable, because if they don't, you might need to change what you're doing, right? You might want to make sure that they are valuable, and talking to people is the best way to find that out. Permeate and saturate, being a little stealthy and operating under the radar when it might be helpful. And the converse of that is important to keep in mind, that you know, it's very tempting to make this big L. Ron Hubbard, the power of performance measurement thing, you know, and do a big launch of a performance initiative with lots of whiz-bang stuff going on. Usually that kind of backfires. So in some ways we're using stealth as a placeholder for not doing that, right? But being more consistent and thoughtful and consistent with with the efforts to permeate and saturate the use of data throughout the organization. And then when the threats of change come, be flexible and adaptive and integrate new approaches. Don't be afraid to do it, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater while you're doing that. Any last thoughts, Ann?
I would say the last little bit of the integration of new approaches, realize that it's not going to be your way the whole time. And so the more willing you are and the more able you are to accept new approaches and find out how you can integrate new approaches within the system you've created, the longer it'll last, the longer you'll be able to sustain it.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Ann, and thanks a lot, everybody. I'll see you on the internet. Bye-bye.